What's up guys, this is Pink Across. Today I'm going to be explaining how to build HO resistant teams. Let's get right into it with the most obvious one, which is priority. So these are the big four in the tier. Ideally choiced, at least on Rillaboom and Dragonite. You definitely don't want to put a choice item on either of these guys, but with this Extreme Speed, Grassy Glide, Thunderclap, and Sucker Punch, these are by far the strongest priority Pokemon in the tier. Having priority against Hyper Offense is just incredible. I would say probably the best of these is going to be Rillaboom, even though Grass is resisted by a lot of the Hyper Offense Pokemon in the tier. Pokemon frequently Terra when they're set up, and just it's fantastic to have this unconditional priority. Now these two are great as well, but a lot of Pokemon on Hyper Offense are adapting and running Substitute, or perhaps have priority moves of their own. So you'll want to be aware of that, but overall you really can't exactly be defensively ready for every sweeper Hyper Offense can throw at you. So it's really, really good to have priority. Number two, let's talk about unaware Pokemon. So I would say the main one you're going to be using is Skeledirge, unless you're building a stall team. Because for the most part, these guys, like the unaware Clodsire and unaware Dondozo, pretty much only stall. I mean, you can use them on other playstyles, but it's very difficult to fit, very niche uses. This is probably going to be your standard Skeledirge, just specially defensive. Wispex, Torch Song, Slack Off, although Skeledirge did recently get Alluring Voice, which makes this set pretty cool as well. So the Fairy, Fire, Ground coverage is actually insane. This thing can start sweeps, and even especially with Terra Fairy and Alluring Voice, you can stop Roaring Moon. So it's one of the few things that can do that, although it does need to use Terra. And Terra Steel, Calm Mind, Unaware Clefable is pretty nasty as well. That can really stop a lot of sweepers. So mainly Skeledirge and Clefable for your more balanced teams, but if you're using stall, this is an option as well. Number three, we have Status. Basically, Toxic in particular is really good because it can wear down and force chip on sweepers. Dragapult with this dual status is a great thing against Hyper Offense. And any of these really stop a sweeper. Like if you Will-O-Wisp a physical sweeper, it's going to be in trouble. If you Thunder Wave a speed boosting sweeper, it loses a lot of its potency. And of course, poisoning anything is going to put it on a timer. Now there is some resistance. As I said, Substitute is not unheard of on Hyper Offense, so if a Pokemon like a Volcarona substitutes on your Galarian Slowking Toxic, you are in big trouble, but it can be a really helpful tool. Number four, no passive Pokemon allowed. So what do I mean by passive? I'm talking about a Pokemon that really can't touch what's in front of it and doesn't have a good means of transitioning out. So like no switching move, no strong attacking move. You basically are forced to switch or else something's going to set up on you. So let's take a look. This is not passive. Why is it not passive? Well, we've got Toxic, so it threatens status, and even if it can't threaten anything, it can safely get out with Chilly Reception. Now this is passive. Let's look at this. No attacks, double hazards, rest talk. This is absolutely anything can set up on this. This is pretty terrible. No attacking moves, and sometimes weak attacking moves. Like let's look at this set, right? We got Knockoff, Dual Hazards, Recover. This is still passive. Now we can fix these Pokemon. We can make them not passive. What if we went with Whirlwind or Ruination? All of a sudden this is no longer a passive Tingler. This can phase, this can do damage. Or if this had, say, a Teleport here, all of a sudden it's not as passive. It can safely kind of get out off the field. But you really don't want to have anything on your team that just freely allows setup, or you're going to have a really tough time keeping sweepers from not just running away with the game. Make sure to subscribe, like, and leave a comment, or Roaring Moon will get an additional 20 attack. Please prevent this tragedy from occurring. Next up, we have Dragapult and Zamazenta. I wanted to give a special shout out to these two because they are, in my opinion, by far the strongest two Pokemon against Hyper Offense alone, other than maybe Rillaboom, but that fits into the priority section nicely. So there are a few Dragapult sets. One is this is the increasingly popular Focus Sash set, so you can run Dual Hazards, Hex, and Darts. Really, really threatening offensively to Hyper Offense teams. They really just cannot take this on, and you can basically let any sweeper get, I don't want to say out of control, but to a point you can let a sweeper do what it wants and come in and just stop it with this. I mean, this will stop basically any sweeper. You can kind of think of it almost like a Ditto that doesn't care about substitute and can function well as a Pokemon in its own right. You can also run this set with Boots if you're not running a team that has great hazard control. And Specs Clear Body is great as well, so sticky web teams are becoming more popular, and with Clear Body you ignore the sticky web drop and you pretty much outspeed almost all web's Pokemon and can just really run through them with powerful attacks. So overall, Dragapult, for whatever type of hyper offense your team is struggling with, there's probably a Dragapult set that will destroy it. Now this Zamazenta I really want to highlight. Iron Defense, so not only does Iron Defense Zamazenta shut down almost every physical sweeper. I mean, you think like Gouging Fire, Kingambit, DD Dragonite, SD, Ogerpon, right? Like just having this Iron Defense Pokemon around is incredible. But also it can act as a phaser with Roar, which is just amazing to have too. And you can run this set with Substitute as well. And even Heavy Duty Boots 4 attacks is pretty good. I mean, you have a massive starting defense stat and really powerful attacks with good coverage that can shut down a lot of very threatening sweepers. So these two Pokemon are incredible against hyper offense. Number 6, we have phasing. So you have basically two ways of phasing. One is this item, red card. So if you survive a hit, your attacker is forced to switch to a random ally. I usually like this on Pokemon that don't particularly care about having an item. I've used it on Alomomola in the past. Ting-Lu is a pretty good user if it's on a more offensive team. But also you can phase with attacks. And by the way, what phasing, the word, comes from is pseudo-hazing. So clicking haze, kind of, removing all your target stat changes, this switches them out, essentially hazing. So pseudo-hazing, phasing. We have this set here, which can Whirlwind, Earthquake. Generally, not passive because it can push the opposing Pokemon out. Now, you do have to watch out in some cases, like things like moves like Taunt and Magic Bounce on Hatterene, but for the most part, this can shut down a lot of sweepers. I mean, it's not going to kill them, but typically a combination of hazards and getting a Pokemon off the field will be incredibly good. We just talked about Roar Zamazenta, but here it is again, really, really good set. And, this can get out a lot of Pokemon that are doing substitute shenanigans. It just gets them off the field, which can be especially effective if your team has hazards up. And lastly, we have a Dragon Tail here on Archelodon. I'd say this is the only Dragon Tail user I can really recommend, but it's really, really good and effective against hyper offense. Up in number 7, we have Encore. So you can lock a lot of hyper offensive sweepers into their setup moves with Encore. Now I will say it's generally better on faster Pokemon. Like we've got some bulkier Encore users, like Screamtail can use Encore. And it's decently fast, and you can use Encore on a lot of slower things too. Like if you look in OU, you can run it on Clefable, you can run it on Dragonite, Primarina. For the most part though, you want it on faster Pokemon. And reason for that is you can switch in and still outspeed with something like a Booster Valiant and then hit Encore. Ogerpon can't do that as much, but if you can catch a Pokemon while it's setting up, you can Encore them. Hawlucha, of course, on these terrain teams can become extremely fast very quickly and hit Encore. Now, you do have to deal with the sweeper fairly quickly. If you outspeed and Encore, you've really only locked them in for 2 turns, basically, and then they'll be free. So especially if they're using a boosting move like Dragon Dance, you need to make sure this Pokemon is dead or within range of some priority move in 2 turns. Otherwise, you have just signed your death warrant. And lastly, in number 8, we have just extremely fast Pokemon. So something like a Barraskewda in Rain is going to be outspeeding even a lot of Pokemon at +2 speed, like a Volcarona or a Gouging Fire, and it can do a ton of damage. Similarly, Lilligant Hisui, not quite as fast as Barraskewda, but can still outspeed a lot of Pokemon in Sun with Chlorophyll and Unburden Hawlucha. Now there are a few more, like you could, if you really wanted to, run maybe like a Scarf Deoxys Speed, and there's the Excadrill. Technically, there's a lot of things that you could run that would be extremely fast. But these are the 3 that I consider to be the strongest, and just having something this fast that can outpace almost any even setup Pokemon and do good damage is always a really great tool to have against the sweepers on a hyper offense team. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'm still offering one-on-one tutoring, so if you're interested, the link will be in the description. I'll see you guys next time.